Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning into the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you.
How are you this morning, Dr. Paul?
I'm doing very well, ready and raring to go.
All right.
Lots to talk about today because Netanyahu was at it. He gave a major speech, but we've heard his speeches before, and he's usually not on the mark, and I don't think he's on the mark again because he was explaining why we must march closer to war with Iran. He wouldn't admit that, but what he wants to do is set the stage. This is my opinion. The speech was, anti-Iran, and that they broke all the rules, and they didn't tell the truth, and therefore I think he's setting the stage to give Trump cover. So when Trump, goes and refuses to continue the thing and the agreement and get out of the agreement, that would please him very much. So that's his main goal. But it was a strong speech. Spent a lot of time, had a lot of show and tell. But it was typical. The most important thing that struck me, though, after looking at some of the reports today and listening to his speech yesterday, was it sounded like this, and I thought, this is just faking it all. This can't be the way, because the reports we get and the world gets is IAEA said that they're living up to the agreements and they don't have a program going on. And if you don't want them to have a program, we have to preserve this agreement. Of course, this was exactly opposite of what Netanyahu was saying. But he said that they really have a program going on, a nuclear program, secretive, and he'd show all this. And one word was changed today because, this was on a news report, and they say, well, the Israelis were walking back his speech. They're correcting it. And the correction I heard them talk about making was they changed one word, have versus had. So if you look at everything he said, in that they had some of these programs once before, all of a sudden it has no meaning. So I think it's a staged performance, and he's done it before. And I'm sure you remember well the speeches that we heard on the House floor on why we had to go into Iraq. So people should be very suspicious of what's going on. So it was a dramatic speech. It had some effect on the markets. It wasn't overwhelming. So it looks like the market hasn't bought into this an absolute separation of the United States with this treaty or agreement with Iran, which is good in a sense, but it still is setting the stage because they have an alliance. Israel has their position; they've had it for a long time, and Trump's position is essentially the same. And interesting enough, the third country that is very much involved in this collusion against Iran is Saudi Arabia. So it's interesting how these groups come together, but it's also an important time. We have hopeful signs, in Korea, and this may affect that, and we might talk about that in a little bit, but it might have an effect on that agreement. But certainly the big deal is May 12th, and we've already visited the subject of May 12th on what Trump is going to do.
Yeah, and the presentation was typical Netanyahu theatrics. He's standing in front of all of these binders and a huge case of CDs. And someone pointed out that all of the data on those CDs could fit into a small pocket hard drive. So it really was for all the theatrics with a big sign, Iran lied. It was very theatrical. If they had information, accurate and current information, that Iran was not in accordance with the IAEA agreement, why not just deliver that information to the IAEA and ask them to start an investigation?
Right.
No, it's all about theatrics. Just like in 2012, when he went before the UN and he widely ridiculed, held up this picture of a bomb, and looked really dumb, saying they're only 3 months away from a bomb. And of course, every single time he's done this, dating back to 1992, he's been wrong. So he doesn't have any credibility. As you point out, we can get into it later, the specifics of why what he said was actually quite deceptive.
Right, and I imagine that the president and our administration would have no problems, cheering him on. They didn't. Our administration didn't point out, well, maybe he's overstepped his viewpoint. Maybe we shouldn't agree with everything. Maybe what we should do is work within the international community. But no, I think our president was quite willing to cheer him on.
And we do have a clip actually, and with we could put it up here. But with Pompeo and Bolton in the White House. It's no surprise they've long had Iran in their sights. But here's what the administration put out right after Netanyahu finished his little show. The United States is aware of the information just released by Israel and continues to examine it carefully. This information provides new and compelling details about Iran's efforts to develop missile deliverable nuclear weapons. The facts are consistent with what the United States has long known. Iran has a robust clandestine nuclear weapons program that it has tried and failed to hide from the world and from its own people. The Iranian regime has showed it will use destructive weapons against its neighbors and others. Iran must never have nuclear weapons.
Both governments have secret spy agencies, Mossad and the CIA. Mm-hmm. And when they reveal and say why we have to go do something or pull off a coup or overthrow a government, they're credible. But this time, Mossad and CIA both disagree that there's been a violation of the agreement and that they aren't working on it. And the best thing in the world if people were looking to, or the Iranians are looking to build a bomb, the thing that we give them the greatest incentive is to destroy that agreement.
Yeah.
Because, there's no way to prevent it. So it just doesn't make any sense at all to right now to break this agreement down. It's sort of like trying to go into Iraq because, the Israelis wanted to go into Iraq because they hated Iran. And what did we do? We turned over Iraq to Iran. It backfired. And this is the same thing here. Even if they had their way, they make the world a much more dangerous place, and it doesn't help them any way whatsoever.
But it's critical for them from a military perspective to get the U.S. on board with an attack on Iran, because Israeli fighter planes are not capable of sustaining a kind of battle with Iran. They have to have U.S. support. They're not able, and that's one of the reasons. Right. But in his presentation, he repackages well-known old material in a really scary way with the dramatic backdrop to make it look as if it's new. But this is the critical thing, and we've talked about this so much. The 2007 NIE, National Intelligence Estimate, from the CIA, concluded that Iran had abandoned its nuclear research in 2003. That was confirmed in 2011 by the IAEA. It confirmed the NIE that Iran had a research program, yes, and that's already been out, but it ended it in 2003. But he's bringing these things up from before then, saying, see, this is something new.
And everybody that supports Netanyahu in this position also recite, as did Netanyahu, and that is the Iranians are the greatest supporters of terrorism in the world. They are the worst group of people, and we know that they're not exactly Jeffersonians, but we also know that if you had to live in an Arab Muslim country that was not maybe a secular leaning, that one of the safest places for Christians to live right now is in Iran. They would never say that. And matter of fact, even Iraq was not that terrible, even under Saddam, in Saddam. So, but they go over and over again. But what about the commitment? Of course, we can't criticize our own government for killing kids, but how many people, how many civilians, how many children have died over the last 15 or 20 years, because it was collateral damage, an awful lot. But what about what Saudi Arabia is doing? Think of the children that are dying in Yemen. Yeah. And there are our allies screaming and hollering because the real battle is between, the big battle is between Saudis and Iran, because they're the oil giants of the world and they're vying for it. So they'll lie and tell these stories. Who's the greatest sponsor of international terrorism? And that in itself, I believe, is an absolute lie. At the same time, we don't want to be in a position of saying, okay, defend this, this, and this. No, we can criticize our own government and point out where they make mistakes and when they're telling outright lies and trying to undo some progress, then we have to try to point that out.
And as you say, we're not here to defend Iran. That's not the purpose of the show. But it's objectively true that Iran has the largest Jewish community outside of Israel in the whole Middle East. So unless the Jewish people that live there are just crazy and they love being abused, there's something there. But the issue of Iran is the greatest sponsor of terrorism. That was repeated again by Pompeo just after Bibi's speech. But we need to break that down and think about it. What do they mean when they say that? Primarily, it's three things: Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen. Okay, Iran is in Syria at the request of the Syrian government, which is an ally of Assad is an ally of Iran. That's why Iran is in Syria. So that could only be terrorism if you believe that Assad, who was fighting ISIS and Al-Qaeda, is in fact a terrorist himself. You have to accept that. Is Assad a terrorist? The second, you have to accept the fact that Lebanon has no right to self-defense. The U.S. government always says, and rightly so, Israel has a right to defend itself. Every country does. But if you believe that Lebanon doesn't have that right, and Iran's support of Hezbollah it violates that, then that's a terrorist. The same is true with Yemen, as you pointed out. You have to believe that Yemen has no right to defend itself against Saudi aggression if its alleged friendship with Iran is somehow a mark of terrorism.
And I think the position that I stated earlier is that if we get rid of the agreement, this makes it a much less safe world. And there's one individual that agrees with me on that, Yussi Arad, and that he's the former head of Netanyahu's National Security Council, and he was in charge of research of the Mossad on the nuclear issues. And he says that he used the word daft, for Netanyahu. In other words, he's saying he's crazy. He's nuts. What is he? He's not the current employee in Netanyahu's administration, but he's been there. He's part of it. He's not anti-Israel. He's not some nut. Yeah. And yet he's just saying this is crazy. And he believes, as I believe, that the world is much more dangerous, and the Iranians will more likely get a nuclear weapon if we get rid of the agreement. And this whole thing is it's far from perfect, but right now Israel is better off with a standoff with this, but they're not going to settle this because there's a lot stirring, in Syria, and you've already mentioned Syria because Israel is very much involved, but it's never in the news. I mean, there's one report 100 times they've bombed up there, and they said, well, we hit this spot and it's a base for the Iranians, and we got them back. But the Iranians said they've denied that they've been injured by Israel. But there's a lot of bombing going on, and the confrontation is getting hotter and hotter.
Yeah, they bombed them just on Sunday night. They bombed 2 bases, and apparently they killed about 30 Iranians who were there illegally, according to international law. So what would happen? How would the Israelis react if the Iranians had bombed Israel a few hundred times? But here's the big thing in Netanyahu's talk: the Ahmad plan. And it sounds scary. He presented it in a scary way. This is something new that we've uncovered. This is their secret nuclear weapons plan. It was detailed by the IAEA back in 2011. There's a report, the November 8th, 2011 report from the IAEA talked in detail about the Ahmad plan. They concluded, here's what the IAEA said after they had inspected. The Ahmad plan was stopped rather abruptly, pursuant to a halt order instruction issued in 2003 by senior Iranian officials. So this is something that stopped in 2003.
And then I was saying they're trying to say it's like something it's going on.
Something new.
So if that is a lie, it's a gross, deliberate distortion, which is essentially a lie too. But the other factor in here is the European Union. Because generally speaking, the European Union sort of like the breakthrough with the Iranians because they can trade and they've already done it, and they want to hang on to this. And even Trump's best little buddy, Macron, he would like to see it continue as well as the Germans. The European Union does not want this to happen. So it'll be interesting. It'll be fascinating to see how Trump gets out of this. So I've seen Trump as over here and over here. and he's been able to try to appeal and appease both sides. And I think of this recent bombing. Well, yeah, I got to be tough. That's my base. I want to be tough on the Syrians, and so we'll go in and bomb these bases. But we don't want to annoy Russia. We'll tell them where we're bombing. so they go ahead and do that. So the people say, yeah, he's bombing. He's teaching them a lesson, and they'll come our way for this. And at the same time, though, it's still very, very dangerous. And he makes sure that nobody gets killed rather than getting blamed for escalating the war. But it's interesting to think how's this going to affect what's going on in Korea. Because we've been cautiously optimistic that good things are happening in Korea, and this could interfere with it, because if he can see his way to have a change in policy with Korea from what has been our policy, because they were considered, one of the monster nations, all of a sudden change, and we're talking to him, and he's going to meet on the DMZ, and this is exciting stuff. But if that is the case, and it's good, and he's loving it, and he's going to get the Nobel Peace Prize, why wouldn't he think, well, maybe that's good for Iran? Maybe the world should adapt to this type of thing. But no, it's peace over here and common sense, even after yelling and screaming how horrible he was and how many bombs and how we could wipe them off the face of the earth, and then we go and do the opposite. And but I think what might happen, though, is if we break this agreement, it might send a bad signal to Kim and say, hey, can we trust this guy, or can we trust the Americans? Are the Americans telling the truth? Have the Americans ever broken an agreement? Every once in a while they do,
I mean, that definitely sends a signal. You can't trust the Americans, you can't make deals with them. But, Pompeo assured us, don't worry, the North Koreans, it's not going to bother them at all if we break this deal. But listen to this, what Bolton said yesterday. Talk about having a rocks for brain, although he's a smart person. He's smart but evil. He said, the North Korean denuclearization process, the model for that, in our estimation, is Libya. So can you imagine if you're a North Korean, you're sitting there, you're still remembering them stabbing Gaddafi to death and all kinds of horrible things, and he comes out and says, well, our model is Libya for North Korea.
So the IQ is no guarantee that they'll have any wisdom.
Yeah, that's true.
Boy.
But if I could just really quickly go through a few things, because it's Israel, Netanyahu is not Israel. He's a politician. He's a controversial politician. He's a politician that has a lot of problems at home, and that might be why he's trying to bluster overseas. So when we criticize Netanyahu's behavior, it's not a reflection of the Israeli people. I think a lot of them don't want to have a war,
right.
Plenty of them. But here he was in 2002 before Congress. There is no question whatsoever that Saddam Hussein is seeking and working on and advancing toward the development of nuclear weapons. No question whatsoever. Congress ate it up. But that's not all. This Iran thing goes back to 1992. And he's lied to Congress over and over. He told Congress in 92, Iran is 3 to 5 years from a nuclear weapon. In 95, he wrote a book saying Iran would have nukes in 3 to 5 years. In 96, he addressed a joint session of Congress. If Iran were to acquire nuclear weapons, this could presage catastrophic consequences for all mankind. 2002, he told Congress, Iran's nuke program is so advanced the country operates centrifuges the size of washing machines. 2009, he told Congress again, Iran is 1 or 2 years away from a nuke. 2012, they'd have a bomb in a few months. Then he made that dramatic UN presentation at the UN holding up that bomb. And all this is detailed in an Intercept article from 2015 that's worth reading. But here's what's interesting. Recently leaked cables showed that while he was making that 2012 presentation saying they're just months away from a nuke, his own intelligence service had determined, quote, Iran not performing the activity necessary to produce weapons. So he knew he was lying then.
And you wonder why the people get disgusted with governments and why they don't believe government, which I always said that's healthy, because I think they'll all distort and demagogue and lie and twist always for a narrow political viewpoint. But I think the lies are lasting for less time. And like even yesterday, when he was giving this speech, I like to watch what the markets are doing. And the markets were reacting. Oil goes up and the stocks go down, and there's an immediate reaction. But it didn't last that long. And it may change by May 12th, when something else comes up. But really, they dismissed what he said, and that they've heard that before. The only place where I really saw somebody get super excited and wanted to bestow sainthood on Netanyahu was, I think he's with Fox, the guy called Hannity or something like that. He loved it. I tell you, there was no question in mind how great that speech was and how determined it was and how evil the Iranians were. And I thought, and we hear some good stuff coming from Fox these days. They have a little bit more balance, so it was disappointing to hear that. But I think the people are waking up, and hopefully we can help them do that.
Yeah, exactly. And that is the good news, because these things are being debunked almost as they're being done. Someone debunked his drawing of the missile. They've abandoned that type of missile. So these are citizen journalists. These are not the mainstream media journalists who are just the lapdogs of the state. Moon of Alabama had a great piece debunking it. But I wanted to just, in my closing, we didn't talk about it. We'll talk a little bit about our conference. I think we had a great time. We were in South Carolina on Sunday. We were with the Future of Freedom Foundation. We had a really packed audience, a lot of great young people there, a lot of great questions, a lot of pretty good speeches, I have to say. So we had a great time. We had a great conference. We love meeting people. We love seeing people getting together and making connections, and that's what they did. We've got another one, Dr. Paul, coming up in August. I'm going to give the dates and a little bit more details in the next week or so. But it really is encouraging. I don't know how you feel, Dr. Paul, but I feel so encouraged when I meet people. And I want to say I met several people, many people at that conference on Sunday who said, I watch the Liberty Report live every day. And that felt great.
Well, it really bothered me. I think you got louder applause than I got, so that made me a little bit nervous. But I still have that political sense in me, because I walked in and there were so many chairs in there. We knew how many chairs there were, like 300 or something, but there were about 10 or so empty, and I thought, hey, maybe nobody didn't show up. But by the time we really got started, there was standing room only, and there were a few people standing in the back. So the people did come, and they did show up. And I think the important thing is that I've always advocated, this is serious problems. We can't be overly serious, and we should have fun doing it. And when you get together with like-minded people, it is more fun. But the whole subject is what we talk about here, non-interventionism, and they understood it, clearly so. And some come to expand their understanding, and there were some young people there too. There were people here, college-age groups, and younger, some teenagers there. I'm always delighted to see that, because I do not think that automatically we're going to reverse this whole trend in the next 5 or 10 years. You have to work on a longer schedule than that, and you have to change an attitude of a generation of people. And the biggest challenge, of course, is the current generation has been spoon-fed with this Marxism, socialism junk that we're getting in our colleges. But I think there's a lot of resistance to that, and I think that we're participating in that, and that to me is the most important thing. So our obligation is to do our best to seek out the truth and then present it the best way we can, any way we can. So when people ask me, what should I do? How can I do what you want? Just any way you can think of, because everybody has their own method and technique, and your own skills. So I encourage you to stay involved, stay interested, continue to expand your horizons on what non-intervention really is in all areas, whether it has to do with our personal lives, our economic lives, or in foreign policy. The world will be a better place for it. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.